Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. Oh, there's so many of you here. You're gonna have to bear a little bit with our echo. I'm gonna try to talk a little bit more quietly, like Don and Kilolo will. My name is Lisa Viscusi. I'm the manager of adult learning here at the Frick, and I'm, again, so glad that you're here with us. Before we begin, I want to read a land acknowledgement. The Frick Pittsburgh occupies ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Osage, and Shawnee peoples. As a place of history and nature, the Frick recognizes the cultural importance of land, the role of cultural institutions in the formation of collective memory. Displacement and erasure are not just histories for Native peoples. Land acknowledgements, like historic sites themselves, are exercises in preservation and reconciliation, engaged with past, present, and future. Just a few items for everyone here. We have the closed captions turned on, and if you would like to either move them or turn them off, you're more than welcome to do that. Turn them off, you just click the, there's a button on your screen, either on the top or the bottom. Also, you can move them by hovering over them and moving your cursor. Also, please put any comments that you have in the chat. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function. If for some reason you can't find it, you're also welcome to put it in the chat. I'll be monitoring everyone's comments and questions for our speakers tonight. So again, we're just really grateful that you're here, and we're really lucky to have these beautiful works of art here in our galleries, and excited to share this with you. Our current exhibition is called SLAY, Artemisia, Gentileschi, and Kehinde, Wiley. And we're glad you're here to see it with us and to talk about it with Kilolo and Don. The exhibition is possible thanks to the Capodimonte Museum in Naples, Italy, the North Carolina Museum of Art in Raleigh, North Carolina, the Museum Box, and the Frick Pittsburgh. And I want to thank Kilolo and Don, I can see them, you'll see them soon, for being here to share their experience and their knowledge with all of us. And I also want to thank my colleagues Amanda Gillen and Stacy McSorley for supporting the program via technical assistance and camera work. So thanks so much. It's good to have a good team to work with, so thank you. And without further ado, I'm gonna just say a few words about Kalillo and Don, and then you will see them and these beautiful works behind me. Kilolo Luckett is a Pittsburgh-based art historian and curator. She's the founding executive director and chief curator of Alma Lewis, and we are extremely lucky to have her as a consulting curator for SLAY. Welcome, Kilolo. And I want to welcome my colleague, Dawn Reed Brean. She is the chief curator and director of collections at the Frick Pittsburgh. She curated for the Frick the exhibition that we are here tonight to discuss, SLAY. So here we go, ladies.
Thank you, Lisa, for that lovely introduction.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm so thrilled to be standing in this space with you. This is maybe one of the first times we've been together, like just you and I.
Yes.
Like in the gallery space.
That's just the two of us.
So we're standing in front of these two incredibly powerful works of art by two extraordinary artists looking at the same subject 400 years apart. And I think we wanted to give a little bit of context for the story, because I think it's important to have that in mind as you're looking at these paintings. They are both looking at the biblical story from the Old Testament Apocrypha, the book of Judith. And Judith is described as a beautiful, pious widow who saves her Jewish town of Bethulia from the invading Assyrian army. She dons her finest clothing, her best jewelry, and she infiltrates the enemy camp. And the general, Holofernes, sees her, decides that he's going to seduce her, invites her to his tent, and then falls asleep drunk. She then takes his sword and beheads him and saves her Jewish people from destruction. So that's the basic subject that these two paintings are looking at. And for those of you who know the Frick or have seen some of our past shows, this is a very different kind of show for us to take on. So as we were doing that, we really wanted to think about a thought partner. And Kilolo was one of the first people that came to mind. So we invited her, asked her if she was interested. And I wonder what you thought when we approached you with this pairing.
Yes, thank you, Dawn. And thank you to the Frick and all the people working behind the scenes to make this possible. So when you reached out to me, you and Lizzie, to be a consulting curator and a thought partner in this exhibition, I immediately did a happy dance. And I first thought about back in the days of my art history classes, and I felt like, wow, Artemisia Gentileschi was one of the first female painters that I ever learned about. And so for me, she's just this powerful figure that just embodied so much that really, propelled me in the way in which I navigate the world. And so I just enthusiastically said yes. And then also having this other dialogue with another monumental artist, Kehinde Wiley, I was just like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for not only for me to engage with the Frick, but it to be here in Pittsburgh is such a extraordinary thing to happen. And that the Frick is the first venue to take this on, and then it will travel to 2 other museums.
We were so thrilled when you said yes, because you're bringing super deep knowledge of Baroque art and of Artemisia. And I also really liked your approach and your kind of thinking about close looking, close inspection, generative dialogue. And I think in our conversations with you, you influenced how we shaped the physical experience within the space and also the facilitated experiences that we're offering through conversations with our gallery facilitators. But I hope we can talk a little bit about that phrase. It's a phrase that impressed me, I think the most one, not impressed me, but just like, I just was like, oh, she's the perfect partner, was the phrase intentional vulnerability, because those words encapsulated an idea in my mind that I hadn't given a definition to, and it was a lovely thought.
Well, I use that phrase because it has a lot of just, I would say, emotional, but also just the relationships in which I want to maneuver and operate throughout my professional career, and just how the way in which we build relationships, especially right now, given the pandemics and this racial moment, which has been ongoing, but it just really erupted 2 years ago. And so for me, and working outside museums, because I've worked inside museums, and I feel like the work that I do is much more, it's better situated outside of the museums, in the way that I can just be more of myself and bring my whole self to projects like working with you at the Frick. And so this intentional vulnerability is really first and foremost thinking about like how can we be kind to ourselves, extend grace to ourselves. In turn, we'll be able to do that with other people that we work with that we might not always agree, and that can be a very healthy thing. And so dissent and how we disagree and how we work through things that we might not really see eye to eye with. And so one of our first conversations, and you having some of your colleagues here at the Frick, I was just like, hey, Dawn, can we just pull those images up and can we just do this kind of slow looking? I love to be able to look at works and just ask people, what do you see? It's not a trick question. It's like, what do you actually see? What is in front of you? And typically as a curator, we don't really ask people that. It's always about, this is what this painting means. These things, these elements, these components, the lighting. And so I feel like we do a disservice to our field when we're not really interacting and engaging other people outside of our own, lens as curators.
I think there's a perception to a lot of people that that's what museums do. Museums are these bastions of knowledge who just tell you what art is important and what you should know about the art and why it's important. And slowly, that's changing and evolving as so many things are changing and evolving lately. And for me, it opens up so many possibilities. Curators don't have to have all of the answers, and we can invite our visitors and others, everyone, to join us in a conversation about the meaning of these paintings. And one thing that's so incredibly exciting about one thing, there's like 1,000 things that are incredibly exciting about this pairing. It's the way that they speak to us individually. I can spend time, I can look at one canvas and have so many different thoughts, but then they speak to each other at the same time, and it becomes even more powerful and nuanced and compelling when we look at them together.
So John, let's talk about the artists. So shall we start with Kehinde, since we're right here?
Start with Kehinde.
Yes.
So Kehinde is, I would kind of describe him as what the rock star personality of contemporary art.
Yes.
He is, like his paintings, kind of a larger than life character. He was born in the late 70s in Los Angeles and grew up taking art classes and going to museums like the Huntington. And he developed this love of old master portraits in particular, like Gainsborough and Reynolds. And he found himself really drawn to these depictions of power and prestige. But he has talked really openly about how he was also very keenly aware that those portraits and those representations on museum walls did not include people who looked like him. And so he has really taken this language, the visual language of old master portraits and paintings, and subverted viewers' expectations by placing Black men and women within the paintings, including them in the narrative, showing them in ways that they have not been shown throughout a lot of art history, and really, questioning and critiquing the art historical canon. It's larger than life and incredibly powerful. And I've admired his work for so long and never would have thought that we would have a Kehinde Wiley in our galleries at the Frick. So it's just incredible to have his work here in conversation with Artemisia.
All right, so we can go on over to Artemisia. So Artemisia was born in the late 1500s, and at a very young age, she started painting, and she had this gift. And one has to remember that during this time period that women were unable to paint in the academy. They were unwelcomed. And so Artemisia's father was a painter, and he really helped nurture her talents as a painter. And so at a very young age, she was painting these exquisite works. And a really tragic thing happened to her as a teenager, as a young woman. At the time, one of Artemisia's father's colleagues who was painting with him raped her. And so this sexual violence, this assault, really impacted her life. And so this is one of the works that she painted. She depicted this Judith slaying Holofernes multiple times. And this iteration that you see, I see this as a very autobiographical for Artemisia. Yes, this is Judith, but I also see this as Artemisia. But after the sexual assault, Artemisia went on to continue to paint for very affluent families, the Medicis, and also the church that commissioned her to do works. And also she married and lived her life as a painter, but also had a pretty, I would say, tumultuous life. Because even during the trial, because her family did take the man who sexually assaulted her to court. And you got to remember, during this time period, this is the early 1600s. Sexual assault is not what we think about it today. They call it the term of defloration. And so it's really a shame upon the family. And so the family's shame, you know, them having to carry this, they were just like, hey, this is wrong. And so Artemisia basically was tortured in order to prove her innocence. And so there's more to the story, and I really invite people to learn more about Artemisia and her life. You can online, and there's also some wonderful books that talk about her. But her life isn't just only about pain. It's really about the power that women hold and what we possess. And so we talk about this, Dawn, about this sword that she's holding, and that she is literally slaying the patriarchy through this act of beheading called furnace. And she has an accomplice. And in the biblical story, there is not an accomplice, but you know, we use our imagination as creative people, and that she had this counterpart, this person that really was, you know, their sisterhood. Yes, the sisterhood, absolutely. Yes, so that in which Artemisia, hence Judith, has somebody working with her alongside her. And I think that this is, we were talking about this earlier, about how radical of a painting of the time period this was.
I mean, it is so graphic, and it's unsettling. When I look at this painting, I feel just a lot of different emotions, and I think that says something about ideas of womanhood in the 1600s, that there are some of those ideas that have carried through to maybe modern day. I remember you saying in one of our training sessions, you know, oh, she's doing the most unladylike thing you can do. It's like, yeah, definitely. And I mean,
what were some of those unladylike things, Dawn, that we were talking about?
I mean, look at those sleeves rolled up. Her arms, both of their arms are bare. They are, you know, he is looking out at the viewer, but their gazes are so focused and determined. They're looking down. You can feel the physical power and the placement of their hands and their fists. You can see through the little folds of skin in her servant's wrist, like how much pressure they're putting down on him. And the detail that really, to me, speaks to that unladylike behavior is this small triangle of blue, which is part of her incredible dress. But it tells you, you know, she likely has a knee up on the bed and is holding him down. Like, that is truly unladylike in 1612 when this painting was shown.
Very much so. Yeah, and you can kind of see this life kind of draining from Holofernes. You know, Judith has her hand on his head, literally pulling on his hair, right?
I can feel his hair in my hand. Like, I find myself clenching my fists when I'm looking at this painting because I'm thinking so much about their physical positioning.
Yeah. And just the staining of these exquisite linens on the bed. I mean, once again, 1612, a woman painter making this work among this male-dominated, right, painting. This, so it's that once again for me, I just have to keep thinking about that, of where we are today. You know, museums, yes, women are slowly becoming more included in museums, but to have this work here at the Frick, talking about the happy dance. It is extraordinary that it is here. It really, really is. And the lighting, I feel like I'm literally sitting in theater, and I'm in the front of the second row watching this all play out.
And that's Baroque art, right? I mean, that's the drama, but also the realism and that kind of theatricality that is really in your face and intense. And yeah, to think about this act of violence that's being perpetrated by a woman, painted by a woman, is incredible for that time period.
So Dawn, shall we talk a little bit about Kehinde and the way in which he depicts womanhood, women dynamics, and the absence of a man in this painting?
Right. So Judith is this powerful, strong Black woman, and Holofernes in Kehinde Wiley's version is represented by a white woman's head. It's this painting. I have few words to really describe this painting. It is an emotional experience to see this in person. We spent a lot of time doing our research and reading, and you can read dimensions left and right, but until you're really in front of a work of art in person, like the scale doesn't fully hit you. These two together is just incredible.
This whole position, this stance of her holding the head with her right arm and the sword in her left. Let me see, get that right. I'm always like, oh my gosh, yes. And then the Artemisia one is like that stance is very much like that sword, and the left might be the right. Yeah, it's the sword's in the right and the head's in the left. Yes.
And she's so graceful. Like there's this beautiful swing of her body that is kind of our idea of ladylike grace, which is interesting since this is from Wiley's series called An Economy of Grace, which was his first series to depict women in his paintings.
We have I'm sorry, do you mind? We have a question that pertains particularly to this painting. So Michael is asking, how do you explain the dramatic contrast between the beautiful floral background in Kehinde's painting and the violence he depicts?
Well, I think about the United States and the history of the United States. There's this beauty and there's this brutality, and there are things that hold space together. And this is, for me, kind of like the embodiment of that. You have this violence, but then you have this vitality of this woman of being very liberated. She has this agency. And so I feel like this woman's head is a representation of patriarchy, you know, sexism, women, you know, among women, just these different types of constraints that we put on one another. And that's some of the things that we've talked about, like what does it mean to have two women curators, one Black and one white, talking about this and putting this show together. Rarely do you see this interaction, this camaraderie, and this intentional vulnerability. And so I think that these two competing elements can hold space together. And that's something that we need to do a deeper dive with it. There's that criticality that we need to talk about in not only this painting, the Kehinde Wiley painting, but also the Artemisia Gentileschi, and these intersectionalities of how a Black woman and a white woman are holding space together. What does that mean? It's beyond just the violence that you see physically of a sword and some blood. It's much deeper than that.
Absolutely. There are two women in each of the paintings. And it's funny, I don't often think of this painting as violent, even with the presence of the sword, and there's like the smallest representation of blood. I think about Wiley using this story of Judith as a device. And I think in a lot of ways, he could be commenting on the patriarchy in the same way that Artemisia is. You and I have kind of talked about the face of Holofernes here. There's something alive about her face, and when you're here in the gallery space and you really can see this in person, her eyes feel open. Like Kilolo, you mentioned the life draining away in the Holofernes and Artemisia's painting. There's more vitality here. And we've talked about her being like hidden or in this kind of subservient position. I see her in a way as maybe liberated from something herself. And maybe this Judith is a savior and an icon in a way representing the story, the original story.
Yes, very much so. Thank you, Michael, for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. We also have a question, and I think I know the answer, but is there a significance to the tattoo on the inside of the arm? I believe that was on the model.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about
The staging of this.
Yeah. His process of street casting too, which is really interesting. Like the models for his paintings, he usually finds just walking around on the streets of New York or Brooklyn or wherever he happens to be around the globe. And so he really, he works with his sitters. So in this series, An Economy of Race, he worked with the women who posed for his paintings. They usually select the paintings that they're going to represent together. Kehinde is always, his works are always usually referencing one specific artwork, not necessarily a style. So that's why you see her in this exact pose. In this case, he's referencing a 17th century version of Judith and Holofernes. And I should say, we didn't mention this at the beginning. Judith and Holofernes is a story that has been depicted by artists for thousands of years in thousands of different ways. Now I've lost track of the original question.
It was about the tattoo on the inside and the models. Process.
So I think he is representing her as she was in his studio, as he captured her. She is a real woman and not, just a figment of an artistic imagination.
And that was the gown that she was wearing. Yes, the Artemisia, right?
Yes.
Givenchy.
Yes.
Right.
What they worked with Givenchy for these custom designed gowns for the women to wear in his paintings. The same color as Judith's dress in the other painting. Kilolo and I were both lamenting that neither of us had anything to rival these gowns.
Yeah, so we're
wearing black.
Yes, black dresses.
Can you speak to, this is a question for me, like the juxtaposition of this street casting and getting models of people who are living everyday life in Brooklyn, I believe he was, and the couture that he's putting these women in, and also along with the fact, the extraordinary nature of a Black woman being depicted in a masterpiece of, masterwork. So there's a lot of, I think he works a lot with juxtaposition.
Yes, yes. And also just honoring Black women, because rarely do we see Black women during these time periods that he is interrogating. They tend to they tend to be nameless. They tend to be in these subservient roles. And so, as you were saying, he does invert that. And so he queries, why aren't there, or why don't we see much of, Black women being elevated in these positions? And also, I just feel like once, when we take care of Black women, everybody's taken care of. There's also something else that I wanted to point out about this Holofernes being this woman. That's a real person too. It's actually one of his studio assistants.
Right.
And she was literally kneeling
Yes.
in that position with her head forward. And can we talk about this ponytail?
Yes.
Let's talk about the ponytail.
Let's talk about the ponytail.
Yes.
What does the ponytail mean to you?
Yes, well, since my hair is naturally, it kind of grows up, usually I will have a ponytail, I'll have an afro puff. Or if I have ponytail, it will be in the form of braids, or if I have to straighten my hair when I was a child. But the ponytail is really this symbol of freedom. And I also think about sports because I played sports growing up, and this carefree, or even somebody jogging and their ponytail, and there's something about the history of the ponytail and a white woman in a ponytail that Kehinde is really calling attention to as well.
It's this symbol of femininity, like the fact that, if there's something about being active or doing sports, but you still are in your ponytail tied up with a lovely bow, like it's something that indicates like proper ladyhood or womanhood. I see it as this representation of white beauty standards that has historically prized light skin, smooth hair, and it kind of throwing that away and showing Judith in a way that Kehinde Wiley knows to be beautiful, and representing her in a way that for everyone to see how beautiful she is.
Yeah. And even the way in which Holofernes is looking down, it's this white woman's head, but I also look at the maidservant. Here, we are talking about that because, once again, you look at these images in a textbook, a book, and a catalog, or sitting in a room when you're in school and taking our history classes and the slide comes up, right? But then when you see it in person, there's so much detail and so many other elements that you start to look at. And we were talking about how she is looking down, she has brown hair, there's some similarities here that one can look at and say, hey, there is this connection between these two. And not only that there's a lot that they have in common, there's other things that kind of that stand alone. And even when this was being installed, and Dawn, you took pictures and you're like, oh, look, you're sending me. I first was a little nervous about just how the size of Kehinde's work was. I was like, oh my God, is he gonna dwarf Artemisia? No, they both can hold their own. And it is quite remarkable that they both do hold their own, but they're also simultaneously in conversation.
We have actually I think it's relevant to right now, so I would like to ask you rather than wait. Someone just commented, I originally thought the head was a male head until both Kalillo and Dawn said it was a woman. So I was startled. Why do you think the artist chose a woman, not a man, to be beheaded? It is, and they repeated, it's the white woman upholding the patriarchy. Or is the white woman upholding the patriarchy is the question.
I think there's some weight to the idea of the role of white women in upholding white supremacy and racism in America.
Yeah.
And that, my mind goes to that when I see this representation. I think Wiley's work speaks to issues of race and gender and power and representation and value. That's a word that we talked about a lot. Whose experiences are valued, and museums play into that idea for me a lot too, because in how museums collect what they choose to show in their galleries, we are defining in a way what we think is valuable and valuable for others to know or share. And so for us to include this representation is indicating what we value, and this is an experience worth valuing.
For sure. That was a great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, Dawn, I have a question for you. In your role here as chief curator, I would say you tend to work with people who are deceased for the most part.
Yes.
So what's that like working with both the deceased artist and an artist who's very much in the height of their career and still has so much more to give artistically?
I used to joke that I preferred my artist dead, but that's terrible. First of all, it's a terrible joke. I'm really sorry. I'm just super cordial. But I have, as I've had more experience, I've grown professionally. Like, there is a real joy to working with living artists, to working with, though I haven't had the chance to sit down with Kehinde, Wiley,
And if you're watching Kehinde or your gallery, please, we would love to be in conversation with you.
Our invitation is still outstanding.
That's right.
But he has spoken so often about his work and provided so much context, and to be able to hear his words and thinking about, the posing of Holofernes here and knowing that it's his studio assistant. He published a documentary of how he created the series, An Economy of Grace. So you are given so much context and ideas of motivation and intentionality and what's driving him, the creative force, that you just can't get from Artemisia necessarily. I think there's more and more and more research that's coming out, but she's kind of rediscovered on the academic field in 1989 with the publication of Mary Gerard's book. And there's more and more coming out about her very complex and vibrant personality, where she becomes more of a person than a character. And so living artists, it's just incredible to see someone engaging with the ideas of today, but also engaging with the history of art and using it in a way that generates questions and conversations. I think that both of these works they speak to us today. I think they'll speak to us in 50 years, maybe when I'll be standing here in front of them in 50 years and having a different conversation about a different evolution.
Yeah, they're both timeless, that's for sure. And let's see, what else? Yeah, what did you just say? What you wrote up there?
Just thinking,
You're just being.
just
I love how you're giving, yes, giving us little.
we now have cue cards. We're getting to be a professional television show. Well, I know that as you're talking, it's making me think of what we had talked about before, about, well, you talked about at the beginning about your relationship and the importance of the actual relationship between the two of you in taking on this project, and using this show moving forward as a model that interrogates the norm in layered ways. Like I couldn't even say one way. And so I thought, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about sort of your hope for that and how you have seen it play out during this curation?
Sure. Yeah, I think that although there's a lot of themes that are very heavy, I find it to be very empowering to work on this show and work on it with an esteemed colleague. Really, really. And I was telling you how we have yet to understand the work that we're doing that goes into this show, because you rarely see these dynamics of two women curators who one's white and one's black. So really, really. And so working in contemporary times, and that I tend to work with a lot of living artists, artists who are emerging and mid-career artists, and being able to work with you here at the Frick, and to, I always say Artemisia is like kind of like my jam. I say that. and be raised Catholic and these biblical stories and icons and, you know, growing up in a household of boys and so, you know, I had to speak up all the time. So in a way, for me, there's this kind of mirroring of this autobiography playing out for me in my career when I just thought, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be working outside the museum and doing my own thing and then partnering with museums. But this is a kind of very different partnership for me.
It's been a really different partnership for me too, in wonderful ways. I feel like a lot of what we have talked about and your view of looking at art and the kind of slowing down and with those looking exercises, I think that will kind of forever change how I think about exhibitions and think about art. And I remember, maybe in our first conversation, I remember us talking about the heavier themes of this show. And you said, but I think people are hungry for those conversations. And I think that is really true. I think there are people who we've been encouraging our visitors. We hope you come here with an open heart and a curious mind, and you're ready to, you know, just look and engage. And it's been really incredible to overhear visitors or hear some visitor responses. This is kind of a foundational show for their group. I feel almost a paradigm shift in how we are thinking about the art that we show here.
And you know I love books and like in front of us behind us, yes. Yeah, the books, we're like, okay, what are you reading? What are you reading? Okay, well, let's put this.
I'm just buying them.
Yes, this is a shelf of books and we can have them available and people are loving them. They're picking them up, they're reading them, they're buying them, and it's wonderful. I mean, we also have, you know, the exhibition catalog that is in the gift shop available for people to purchase, and it's also on the shelf here. But also just other books that the artists, like Kehinde, we have books about him. What else has informed his practice? What has informed our practices as curators? So it's a wonderful way for visitors to get a much more deeper understanding and knowledge of not only the works, but the people behind the works, and then also the people putting on the works. Yeah, yes.
Thank you, Stacy, for panning the book, our reading area. I wanted people to see it because it's so delightful in here. I'm going to remind everybody you can start throwing some questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And if you don't mind, I'll read a couple for now. And then if there's anything else you want to finish up by saying, please do. We have a bit of time left for Q&A. So Michael, I believe it's our same Michael again, says it's interesting that Kehinde does not choose to show violence, but rather the finished act. Why? Versus, I suppose, the Artemisia. Well, I'll let you answer that and then tell you the next thing.
I think that, you know, we've mentioned how many artists have looked at the story of Judith and depicted it, and I think generally a lot of artists do depict Judith in the moments just before or just after the act of violence. So I think in that way, carry that tradition forward, whereas Artemisia was pretty radical in her depiction of the act, the moment of violence.
Right, because lead up to this painting, you have Caravaggio.
Right.
And
I think we have better.
Yeah, we have a few. I was actually going to ask you about the other Judiths, as we've been calling them.
Yes.
To your question, Michael, the depictions are vast. And we have a couple here for you. We're looking right now at
that's the Caravaggio.
the Caravaggio.
Yes. And you see Judith depicted as this kind of, oh my God, am I doing this? Am I really doing this? Questioning herself. And, you know, I find it that she's very kind of dainty. She's not sure she's going to go through with the act. I don't know. What do you think, John?
Absolutely. Like, whereas these women have agency and physical, powerful strength, Caravaggio's Judith looks Like, I'm not sure how she lifted that sword. She looks so timid and dainty.
And her maidservant is
The
very,
foil, yes.
very old,
Yes.
very old in this depiction.
Which is not, I think, uncommon. I think what is uncommon is Artemisia's depiction of her maidservant as kind of a comrade and woman of the same age. Usually, Abra, the maidservant, is depicted as a haggard crone to, you know, offset to Judith's beauty and piety.
And even Caravaggio, if you look at the way Judith is dressed, I mean, she has this very light top on and these perky breasts, as if, you know, she is just being,
It's titillating.
yes, it's titillating, yes, absolutely. And that's something, of course, Artemisia is not, she is not down with that. She's like, I'm getting this done. I am very focused. I know what I'm doing and I have help. And so I can lift the sword. I'm doing it.
She's in it.
She is in it. That's right, that's right.
Michelle is saying, I was so impressed by the way you arranged the exhibit, the large quotes as you enter, then the small versions of so many other artists painting this subject, which we were just saying, the other Judiths. And then the amazing impact when you turn the corner and see these two magnificent works. So do you want to talk about how we set this up, how we set up the exhibition?
First of all, I really appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm so, like, I feel like you got what we were going for. It's so wonderful. We talked a lot about these paintings. I mean, the fact that they are, Artemisia's painting is depicting very graphic violence. Our text panels reference Artemisia's biography and her experience of sexual assault. So we really wanted to be sensitive to that fact. And we wanted visitors, we didn't want anyone to just happen upon either of these paintings without really having intentionality and wanting to engage with them. So we had the idea of having this L-shaped wall so that you can, it's like a choose your own adventure. You can choose which pathway to go down. And if you come in this way, you see Artemisia first and then pan around to Kehinde's work. If you come in the other way, it's the opposite. So yeah, I feel like I want like a counter to see which way people are going more often.
Yeah,
The in-between.
yes.
And
And then the lighting too, I love the lighting and then even the colored walls. And then the quotes too are wonderful. When you're walking down those hallways, I feel like those are such powerful quotes that you pulled to put in.
Wanting to give like that context for, you know, Kehinde is telling you my work has to do with power and who has it. And then the kind of newly discovered quotes from Artemisia that show she's tenacious, to say the least. You know, it puts her in perspective even more for me, like her frustration at being this very incredibly talented woman in a male-dominated field, and how she might have been playing on the notoriety of her reputation in a way, but still struggling because she was a woman and everyone doubted.
And a very young woman when she painted this. I mean, she was what, 18, 19, 20, not even 20, painting this.
It's incredible.
It is extraordinary. Extraordinary.
We have an amazing question, not surprisingly, from our colleague Elizabeth Barker. And it is the following. I feel like it's like an interview question almost. If you could wave a magic wand and add any artwork in the world to this show, what would you choose and why?
That's really hard, but such a good question.
Okay, maybe that's a great question. Gosh, there's so many different ones. I wouldn't choose a painting. I would not choose a painting. Yes, I would, trying to think, it's not a painting. Well, Lizzie, let's ask you first. What would you, while we're speaking? Yeah, I'm turning that around, yes.
Lizzie, if you have a thought and you want to chime in on the Q&A or the chat, we're here for, I will say, if this is an addition to this question, or maybe an answer to the question, Diane made a comment, I would love to see a Kehinde Wiley portrait of Vanessa German.
Oh, interesting.
Perhaps the Frick could commission one. And then, but I was thinking, what about a Vanessa German piece of some sort? I don't know. It's just my 2 cents.
Okay.
I know nothing compared to what they know. So.
I feel like that is just an impossible question. I feel like there's like a glitch in my system now. Like every single artwork that I this it's really hard.
Not one really comes to mind, but there's something about sculpture for me that, and it might not be like a figurative, it might be something that's more abstract to really do much more, I would say, just a philosophical critique on all of these different kind of isms, from racism and sexism and currency and these social hierarchies that are still very much playing out. Has Lizzie answered the question?
She just the question and answer just came into the studio.
Okay.
I'll read it here. I didn't have anything in mind, she says, although I'm now thinking about David and Goliath by Michelangelo, or Verrocchio? I did it. As an Italian, I should be able to say that. As possible sculpture comparisons. And then someone in the chat, Nancy, said, how about a Stephen Towns boat?
Oh my gosh, wow. Wow.
If everyone doesn't know Kilolo, do you want to talk quickly about Stephen Towns?
Stephen Towns is an artist based in Baltimore, and he's a painter and a fiber artist. And his show that just wrapped up at the Westmoreland Museum of American Art, called Stephen Towns' Declaration of Resistance, his work is very much rooted and influenced by Baroque medieval art, and the Frick loaned a beautiful piece in the companion exhibition that I curated as well. And it's traveling, it's going to be at the Boise Art Museum on June 11th. So thanks for asking that. Was that Nancy? Nancy Washington.
No, Nancy Statler.
Oh, Nancy Statler. Oh, hello.
Hello.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just thinking about photography too. There's something about photography for me, because during, of course, Artemisia's time, photography was not around. And so people had to use their imagination or have sitters, right? And thinking about this. But then with Kehinde, he's using real people to
Photographs, like these
yes.
them in studios taking photographs.
Absolutely. Yes.
The idea of sculpture, though, would be so incredible, because for this time period and when Artemisia is working, like the way that the medium of oil painting is growing, it's how I think Lizzie would describe this as the super artistry nerd. You know, there's the painters and the sculptors who are kind of vying it out for who can create the more lifelike, realistic representation.
Yeah.
So yeah, having them duke it out in the gallery space would be interesting.
Definitely. Yeah. So we do not have one work of art, but we're talking about different materials and how that would really create an even more dynamic conversation, but also these triangles. I think about that we see these different shapes in both of these paintings. You know, most artists think about the composition, right? And
it's like begging for a third to create.
That's right. Yes.
I'll throw another medium in there, based on Philomena's comment. Hi, Philomena, by the way, it's good to see you. She said, the discussion is wonderful. Thank you. I embroider in the background of Kehinde's painting reminds me of needlework. Do we know if he was drawn from textile arts?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Like his floral backgrounds, which are so lush, so vibrant. I think one of the first things that really captured me seeing this in person was the colors of this particular painting. But yes, he is often using textile patterns and the floral imagery in the background. So this has to be influenced by Renaissance period silks that are coming out of Italy and France in the time period.
I think about adornment too, with what Judith is wearing, and not only this couture gown, but also how she chooses to adorn herself. Not only the makeup, but if you see like the nails and both her fingernails and her toenails, they are highly decorative. They're these stunning pieces, works of art, and how she is holding this pose that she's in. And then we talked about the tattoo as well, and the language of tattoos. That's an art form in itself. That's just some other elements for me that in talking about the background and how this floral is almost like this it's like this garden that she's standing in is kind of enveloping her, but also she could be breaking out of that. There's all of these dualities happening in this painting. I mean, similarly with Artemisia, you just see these exquisite gowns that they're wearing. I mean, I'm like, holy smokes. How is one doing what they're doing? And Dawn, when you're saying, like, she literally has her knee up on the bed. And
I don't think I ever noticed that until
yeah, there's that triangle. And Stacey, I don't mean for you to go back and forth, but anyway, but when you come here, for those who are able to come to the Frick to really enjoy and be in this space, but there are just so many the ways in which this Judith is holding this sword and holding down Holofernes, and then you see Kehinde's Judith and how she is holding this ponytail and holding the sword, and you can partially see the sword here, and they both kind of have this equal weight, and and it's almost as if, okay, here with the head, but almost as if she's tossing that, throwing it away. And there's even this we were talking about, almost like the background is this curtain. Yeah, right. And she is somehow behind it, emerging. Yeah.
And someone is asking, as we suspected, if we could go close in on the toes, which I want to apologize ahead of time. It's a little difficult because it's so low.
Maybe we could pull up
I'll just be
So
sideways.
we're gonna try. While Dawn finishes her thought, if you want to finish what you were saying.
Oh, no,
Oh, this is amazing. This is great.
the danger.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, look at those toenails, the paint, the nail color, first of all, and the point, like you were talking about the angles. It's that like elegant foot, right?
And she's so abstracted, like that black background, the way she's just kind of floating, the way like her weight is, the flowers are like bearing her up. Like that was something that I didn't fully appreciate until seeing it in person. We were talking right before this started about the immortals in Chinese Taoism and how she's, floating just like a penguin.
Philomena says, thank you to the camera.
Thank you.
Thank you, camera person.
Thank you, Stacey. for doing that.
I'm gonna, if it's okay, we're at 8:02. I don't want to keep everyone for too long, but I feel like we could do this as a series for the rest of our lives. So is there anything you want to say before we wrap up and say goodbye and thank you to everyone?
Thank you to you for being
Yeah.
here, for doing this. It's always so much fun to look with you.
Thank you, Dawn. And I know this is just the beginning of our conversation because we've always been talking about this, but this is so wonderful to really be in conversation with you virtually, but in person. Really, it's been a wonderful journey in taking this on and being a part of this. So thank you.
Michelle,
Thank you for coming along with
yes, thank you. And Michelle says, thank you for your teamwork to bring this to Pittsburgh. And I thank you as well. I've had the pleasure of listening to them talk to each other many times, and it is honestly inspirational. And it really it makes me see what's possible. And I see a light in Dawn that is different, which just as her colleague is exciting. And so thank you, Kalillo, for what you bring to her and here and to the city and to the world. So we appreciate you. And yes, Amanda, thank you. I was about to mention that. Kilolo will be back on May 26th for a curator's talk with Cecile Shellman, who is our consulting curator for the Ramari Bearden show, which is a really good conversation piece to this show. They talk to each other in a beautiful way. So I highly recommend you come here. But also they will be in conversation with our director and colleague, Lizzie Barker. So please join us. You can register on our website. And we also have, thank you, Nancy Washington, for such a great evening. Thank you. And Michael again. We have 2 screenings of the Kehinde Wiley Economy of Grace film. They have left my mind, the dates, but they are, I'm sorry, they're May 22nd at 2 p.m. and June 17th at noon. Thank you for that, Stacey.
And we should add that the documentary was available via Hoopla, but it is no longer. So really our screenings might be some of the only opportunities you have to come see is the movie.
Yes, and it's wonderful. And just please come. And thank you to friends like Philomena who can't be here in person. And we will have more opportunities for you to see up close what we have here in the galleries. And just thank you to everybody. We're so happy you were joining us. Thank you, Kilolo and Dawn. And I will say good evening to everyone. Thank you so much. Have a good night.